Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Writers Podcast Interview Show. And I'm doing another multicast episode. I'm getting to be quite a veteran at these now. So this time I have with me Mark Leslie Lefebvre and Julie Strauss, who have co-written together a book about, well, why don't you tell me about it? Julie, why don't you tell us, give me the log line for what your book's about.
So Lover's Moon is a paranormal romantic novel. It is the backstory of the main characters of Mark's long-running series, Canadian Werewolf in London. Sorry, Mark.
Some other city, New York.
Another city, yeah.
I am very sorry. Canadian Werewolf in New York series. And this is the backstory of how the two main characters met and fell in love before all the mayhem began.
All righty. So why don't we start then with Mark? Introduce yourself to our listeners and watchers. Tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and whatnot. And for most people, it's something that comes later on in life. But for you, it seems like something that you were destined to do from day one.
Yeah, I've been writing since, 13 years old. I discovered a Underwood typewriter in my mom's closet, in the back of the closet. I hammered out my first novel, which wasn't really, I thought it was an epic novel. It was probably only about 20,000 words in the summer when I was 14 years old. I got my first rejection when I was writing rejection when I was 15. I think I'd been rejected multiple times before then when I ask a girl to a dance or whatever.
Right. But I was going to ask if it was beyond writing, but
no, yeah, the writing rejection. So I'm just really good at collecting those. And so I'm so glad that when Julie was saying the name of the series that she went to London, because part of the cheekiness and the humor in the series is I did purposely name a Canadian Werewolf in New York,
right,
so that people would think about the familiar, like an American Werewolf in London, which was darkly humorous as a sort of thriller horror film. And I wanted people to go, oh, okay, so there's going to be a werewolf in it, but there's going to be humor and there's going to be some cheekiness and stuff like that.
Right.
And I've returned to that. I think in this latest book, the fifth book in the series, Lover's Moon, especially with Julie's help, oh my God, did the humor ever come out? Like this is truly a romantic comedy, kind of with a werewolf in it. Or really a guy who turns into a wolf rather than a big giant monster.
Okay. All right. How about you, Julie? What's your background in writing?
Very similar. It's sort of the only thing I ever wanted to do. And, started off the same way, short stories. And it was always my favorite class in school. And started working professionally as an editor, and then had kids and was a stay-at-home mom for many, many years. And kept writing, but not doing anything with it. For me, the writing was always, we can get into that later, but it's something I have to do, whether or not I am publishing. I have to keep writing. It sort of keeps me sane. So once the kids got old enough that I could start pursuing outside interests, maybe about 10 years ago, I started pursuing publishing again. And discovered this whole world of indie publishing and indie published authors. And I met Mark, and here we are.
Okay, why don't you two share that experience of meeting each other? How did that come about?
Actually, can I tell it, Mark?
I would love to hear your story.
It was my very first author conference, and I was brand new to this professional world of writers. And everyone was telling me, you got to meet this guy, Mark, from Kobo. You got to meet this guy, Mark.
Right.
And I was like, absolutely not. Like, he sounds like a big deal and I am nothing. And then I saw him and I went, absolutely not. Because everybody at this conference, like, people kind of go up and pay alms to Mark, and everybody loves Mark. And I was like, what the hell? I'm going to walk up to him and he's going to go, get away from me. And then on the last day of the conference, of that particular conference, I decided, honestly, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? What is the scariest thing that's going to happen here? At the worst, what's he going to laugh at me? Okay, that's the absolute worst thing. And so I just steeled my nerves and crossed the room and talked to him. and found out what everybody else on the planet already knew, which he's the best guy in the entire industry. And we just sort of hit it off and started emailing, mainly for, at the time, at first, it was specific questions about publishing through the platform he was working for at the time. But then it turned out we had a lot in common and similar senses of humor, and a beautiful friendship was born. And here we are.
How does that strike you, Mark? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah.
Is that the truth?
I don't remember anyone being intimidated by me. See, I never got that side of things. Just people came up and talked to me, and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited that people want to talk to me.
Right.
Because I was normally rejected all the time.
Right.
But so, I think one of the things at a later conference when Julie and I connected again in person, because most of it was digital, I think over beers, we realized we both adored the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes.
Okay.
And there were things like that and Princess Bride and all of these things. And I went, okay, this is like my sister. Like, this is somebody that I just, and then obviously when I met Julie's husband and he was a Rush fan, I'm like, this is
oh, wow.
Like, you're stuck with me now.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. For people that don't know, Rush is a Canadian band, so quite famous here. And I think they have a fairly good following outside of Canada now, too. They seem to become more popular now than when they were together. So it's quite interesting.
Still have a huge following, yeah.
Yes. So, okay, so you've kind of met and exchanged emails and whatnot. At what point did you decide, or how did it come about, this collaboration? And Mark, why did you let somebody else into your playground?
Yeah, that was a scary thing to do, because Canadian Werewolf. I mean, a Canadian Werewolf in New York, when I first released it, was a standalone novel in 2016. It wasn't until 2020 that I realized there's a series there, that there's other stories I can share.
Right.
And I was making some progress with it, and Julie and I are part of a mastermind. We meet on a weekly basis, and I've long trusted her and valued her input. And I was asking Julie and some of the other writers for help because I wanted to write this romance. I wanted to write this backstory because I'd had some readers who really wanted to know how Michael and Gail first met and fell in love. They're friends now, but way back when they were lovers.
Right.
And so there's this untold story that's kind of alluded to. Kind of like in the first Star Wars, you know, I fought alongside your father in the Clone Wars. and then later on, you hear the story of what that really was.
Right.
And so I struggled. And I mean, I don't write romance. And I tried so hard. I read a book, Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hades, and got the worksheets. And then I tried and I tried and I tried. And I finally realized I was never going to do it without help, without support. And I trusted Julie implicitly. And my biggest fear was asking her, like, would you like to co-write with me? My biggest fear was that she was going to kill me because
or reject you.
We have such different styles. I am a disorganized mess, blue sky, visionary. We'll get to it when we get to it. Work to deadline.
Yeah.
Julie's a lot more organized and plans things out. So I thought, if anything, she's going to have a coronary or kill me because I'm going to cause her so much stress.
Right.
But for some reason, she agreed to work on the project. And honestly, I honestly think the entire series becomes better at having her hand in it.
That's very cool. This sounds a lot like the relationship you had with Joanna Penn when you did the Relaxed Author project.
Yeah. It was kind of like that peanut butter and chocolate thing, right?
Yeah.
Where they both become even better when you put them together.
Right. So, Julie, what's your background, or what's your back catalog in terms of what you've written? Are you a romance writer or what?
I'm a contemporary romance writer,
okay.
and am currently working on historical fiction and literary fiction. Mark has published one of my lit fic stories in an anthology, nowhere near any of the genres that Mark works in other words.
Right. So that was obviously attractive for Mark. Now, how did you find working with a free spirit like Mark?
It was fantastic, in all honesty. It was so good for me because I think because our friendship was already solid, and that was one of our first conversations when he first brought it up. And I said, this friendship is more important than any book ever. I don't care if it's a Pulitzer Prize winning book. I care about the friendship more.
Right.
And so how are we going to not kill each other? Because I was afraid of the same thing. Like, oh, he's going to just never speak to me again once he realizes that I need a schedule.
Right.
And it was just delightful because we were able to set it out where I would say, if this is our deadline, I would like to work this way. And I wrote out this schedule. And then every day was just sort of an adventure where I would know the end point of each chapter, and then I would get it back from him, his chapters, and go, oh my gosh, okay, this is where we're going. And then he kind of had the same experience, and it was so much fun to not be as, I still had to be fairly rigid. I do need a schedule, but to be a little more free was so much fun and really good for me.
Cool. So yeah, lots of times when different styles can really create quite a fusion of synergy, and you can end up with something quite interesting. But Julie, are you a writer that has to know the ending of the story?
Yes.
Mark, are
absolutely.
you?
Well, I know the ending when I get to the ending. Although we had to know that we had to know this one, right? We did have to know this one. Although I did get to play with it a little bit, because when I wrote the epilogue, I kind of was just flying by the seat of my pants, because that wasn't scoped out. It was just sort of like, this thing happens ish. And so to be quite honest, with most of the books, I may have an idea of how it's going to end. So for example, I knew kind of how Fright Night's Big City would end. Although I didn't even know Fright Night's Big City was going to happen, because I was well, what I thought was 3/4 of the way through Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, and I realized this isn't one book, this is two. I need to come up with a wrap up for this book, and then finish the full story in the second book. And that's because I didn't plan things out. And if I planned it out and actually mapped it, I would have realized, no, this is 160,000 words or 170,000 words. I can't do that. I have to keep it under 100.
Okay.
But when Julie gave me the schedule, I write to deadline, right? So I really focus on the deadline. So often people would say, how long does it take to write a book? Oh, a week. A week of nonstop panic, right? After 6 or 9 months of farting around.
Right.
But when she sent that schedule out, it was the month of March 2022. And it was pretty much this round robin. Okay, Julie writes the prologue, I write chapter 1, and the prologue from Gail's point of view. And then chapter 1 from Michael's point of view, and then back to Gail's point of view. And so we wrote those alternating viewpoints. We had mapped out where it was going roughly. Like, we knew this needs to happen here. There needs to be this tension. There needs to be that tension, this doubt, and all of these tropes that are very important for a romance story. But we still got to play. What I loved about it is it was very structured, but we still did discovery writing along the way. So that satisfied the mischievous writer in me, I guess.
Okay. This is the 5th book in the series, right?
Yeah, this is the 5th one.
Okay, so Julie, how was it a crash course for you to get caught up in all the backstory mythology?
Fortunately, I am one of Mark's biggest fans, so I have read all of the books as he's published them. So I had a general idea of, and I did go back and reread and frequently went back and went, how are we going to deal with, wait, does Gail have a brother? Has he ever mentioned a brother? And I would search through for those kinds of details, but it wasn't the intense course that it would have been with someone else, because I was already familiar with his work.
Oh, okay. And of course, Mark, if there were mistakes, you caught them all.
No, it was actually really good, because prior to doing the project, what I tried to do is I tried to pull out all the references that Michael made when he referred to Gail and when they met and anything. Okay. And so I kind of had this scrolling bizarre document with all of these weird elements. Well, Gail owns this shop on this street, and I mean, it's based on a real occult shop in New York. It's the actual same setting and everything. And I like to base it on real things. He lives at the Algonquin Hotel in New York, and it's based on the actual setting. So I'm very, very, even though I'm a chaotic mess when it comes to the creative process, I research like crazy. Okay. Like, I do research the details and go, no, it's not legitimate. The sun doesn't come up right there. It comes up like, 3 degrees to the left. And so that's really, really important to me. And so I think being able to go back and try to pull out those details for Julie helped me probably more than it helped her, because then I could go back and go, oh yeah, you're right. I didn't really mention any family members with Gail other than an uncle.
Right.
So there was a lot of fun discovery there, I think, for both of us.
Okay, so Mark, Julie gave the log line for the last book. What's the capsule summary for the series? Where is it going? And or is this the last book? Is there more books?
Okay, so the series, I think the capsule log line for the series is Alpha Wolf, Beta Human, Big Apple. That's it.
Okay.
Right? Just gives you the sense of humor and stuff. And we played on that when we did, and I love this. Julie came up with this genius log line for Lover's Moon. He's an alpha wolf and a beta boyfriend. She's dated every monster in New York City. It's time for their meet cute. And meet spelled MEAT, of course.
Oh, nice.
Just to play on the old romance trope.
Right.
Because again, we wanted people to understand there's going to be humor here too.
Right. Okay. And what is his function in the story? Is he a cop, detective, or
he's a
salesman?
Writer. No, Michael is a writer. He's a Canadian writer living in New York, and he's relatively successful. So some of his books have been adapted into television series and movies. And so he's making enough money to live comfortably off of it as a pseudo celebrity. And so one of the challenges, of course, in this romance and in his life is for 10 days every month, after sundown, he turns into a wolf. He has no human consciousness or memory, so he has to map out his life to disappear or not be available. So he's going to have to cancel dates. He's going to disappear and make up excuses. Well, I'm out of town.
Right.
and yet sometimes she sees him like, wait a second, I thought you were out of town, because he's trying to hide when he's a wolf. So he also, of course, has supernatural powers as a human. So he can hear people's heartbeats and he can sense their emotions and stuff like that. So that does give him a bit of an advantage, although it's kind of a pushover and doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, so Gail is a confident and very competitive woman. Small business owner, has to be strong, like just really, she's probably more masculine than he is in the grand scheme of things. And so I had so much fun because Gail's a character I fell in love with years ago when I first wrote her, but Julie brought Gail into a whole new dimension, and I fell doubly in love with Gail as I was watching her create this character in more depth than ever before. That was just a phenomenal experience for me.
Okay, so what do the characters like? What's driving the stories for each of these books? Is there an overarching storyline, or are these one-offs? Like, how does that work for you?
So each novel is meant to stand on its own. So a Canadian Werewolf in New York, for example, takes place between sun up and sundown in one single day in the summer. Okay. And then each novel is concerned with its own unique storyline or goal. But there is a continuation of the relationship. So, for example, in the very first novel, Michael goes back to his apartment after, finally getting home because he has to walk around naked and figure out where to get clothes in order to get home because he turned into a wolf in an unexpected place. So his secret stash of clothes is nowhere to be found. So there's a bit of humor in that. He gets there and Gail shows up and he's like, oh my God, Gail. And he realizes, oh my God, she left, stepped out of my life years ago. She dumped me because I had to keep disappearing and lying to her. She thought I was cheating on her, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And wow, I'm still in love with her. And so there's been an ongoing tension where he knows she still has feelings for him because he can scent it and smell it. But she's not ready to get back into a relationship because she's been burned too many times. And he is too much of a pushover to push too hard. And he really loves her friendship. So he doesn't want to ruin that relationship. And so there's this long-term tension. And it's not really until Book 5, Lover's Moon, in the prologue, in modern time, that they actually finally get together. And then there's the backstory because they're talking and say, do you remember when we met? And there's a bit of a joke that we played off of because, people remember things differently.
Sure.
I think Michael remembers certain things that are completely wrong. And the cool thing about getting Gail's point of view in this new book is there's a whole bunch of things he said or thought even with his enhanced powers and abilities, he's still misinterpreted. And as you see Gail's perspective of the same thing, you're like, no, it didn't happen that way. You remembered it incorrectly, which is human, right? We all do that.
Yes. So does she know about his powers or his changing into a wolf, or is he still keeping that a secret? Or is that a spoiler that you don't want to reveal?
No, not at all. Not at all. In Canadian Werewolf in New York, in the very first book, she shows up and says, Andrews, I need your help. I know you're a wolf. I figured it out.
Oh, okay.
Right. And that's why she's back, because she needs his help. She knows he has special powers.
I see.
And so she knows he's a wolf, and she's the only person who knows he's a wolf for the longest time. But in this backstory, in this flashback to 2011, which is 6-7 years earlier, she doesn't know he's a wolf. But there is a bit of a tension: is should I tell her?
Right.
Would she believe me? Well, she's an occult specialist. She probably, if anyone's going to believe me, it's probably her. Except Julie came up with a really great idea for Gail, which was that she may run an occult shop, but Julie?
What we came up with was that Gail is really good at her job, but doesn't necessarily believe in the occult. She just sells all this stuff.
Okay.
Because she was raised by kind of a wacky mom who was always doing all sorts of, and she was like, I just wanted to understand my crazy family. That's why I studied this. That's why I'm an expert. I'm good at what I do, but I don't believe any of it. So, I hope that isn't a spoiler, Mark. Did we just give away?
No, I don't think it's a spoiler, but it creates that tension.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's a thing that's revealed later on, which is a bit of a surprise to Michael.
Yeah.
But I think that again creates more tension. It's like, oh, I don't believe in the supernatural.
Yeah. At this point, right?
Yeah. At this point, yeah.
Right. So I'm curious, Julie, your background of historical and romance fiction. How did you approach the do you like horror, or is that something you've struggled with when you were writing this, or that just you sort of just said to Mark, I'm not really sure about this werewolf or this wolf mythology. Am I doing this right, or how did that work for you?
You hit on the aside from not wanting to ruin our friendship, you hit on my biggest professional fear and objection to this was the first thing I said to Mark is, I think this is a great idea, this book, but you got to find someone who knows horror or knows urban fantasy or this type of thing. I'm not this person. In fact, a lot of, I always buy Mark's books and I will always tell him, I'm super excited to read this new short story you published or whatever. And he will frequently tell me, no, you cannot read that one. Because I am afraid of everything and always terrified. And, but the way into it was the simple fact that Gail does not know at this stage of his universe. Gail doesn't know what's going on. Okay. She's just a New York business owner who's had a string of bad boyfriends. And this one seems good, even though something weird is going on. But I didn't have to deal with any of the horror elements of it, which was something that Mark and I worked out in advance, because not only is it something that I don't want to write, but I don't think I would be good at it. And that's what his fans want is, that's the story they want. And I was just really afraid, what am I going to do to scare your fans? Nothing. The scary thing is when she spills her smoothie on her ex-boyfriend. That's as scary as I get.
Not a Carrie.
Yeah. Right. But the way it worked was that we were just able to stay in our lanes, even though we were merging the two genres. And I was writing a contemporary romance, and Mark in his chapters was handling all of the supernatural.
Okay. Did either of you have, because the character has these extra abilities like senses and that, did you have fun writing scenes between him and his partner? Because he would obviously know when she's agitated and whatnot, or how did that, was that something that you used at all in their relationship?
Yeah, I think so. We played on that, and we did, even though we wrote alternating chapters, we provided each other feedback. It was like, no, she wouldn't say that, or he wouldn't do it that way, or whatever. So we did kind of tweak and adjust, but I had a lot of fun knowing what Julie was going to write, and knowing from
Mm-hmm.
Gail's point of view, but Michael doesn't know Gail's point of view, and
Mm-hmm.
Michael's still a pushover, mild-mannered Canadian, living
Nice
in
guy.
the big metropolis, and
Right.
so he still plays by a different, like, even though he's what is it? It's kind of like I was talking to someone. They said, "Oh my God, this, like, he's taken on every monster, but this is something he just can't handle. Like, this is far scarier for him, like an actual
Right.
relationship." And so I think there was a lot of fun, especially in the scenes. I think in the opening scene when they go to the Barnes and Noble on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan to the meet at the coffee shop there, the Starbucks inside. And you see the point of view from Michael when he sees Gail, and he's just kind of like gaga, head over heels in love.
Mm.
And then alternately, then you see the same scene from Gail's point of view, and she's got so much going on with her shop, and there's a thing going down at the shop, and she's arguing with her best friend on the phone while she's there with Michael. Michael can hear some of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
so he misinterprets things, like she's supposed to be on a celibate year because she's vowed not to be with anyone for a year, and then meets Michael, and then so her best friend Isabeau is reminding her of this, and Michael was thinking that Isabeau needs to be celibate, and she's attracted to the maintenance guy who's at their shop, and so he's misinterpreting everything he's hearing. And we had so much fun with that, because that's what happens in human relationships, is
Right.
we bring our own things to the table and we misinterpret. And so we had a really fun time knowing what the other person was thinking, but playing off of what's the misinterpretation especially when you're nervous or scared or whatever.
Right. So you've mentioned several times, I believe, that you wrote alternate chapters. Did you at any point like go through each other's chapters and edit them or anything like that, so that were you trying to get one voice, or were you happy with the kind of the ping pong ball back and forth between your two writing styles?
No, we very much wanted two different voices, because
Okay.
it was from their two different point of views. But we that was always the first step, is I would get his chapter and go through it, and we would do minor edits, spelling corrections and that kind of thing. But then we would also write back, "Oh, you chose to Michael's going to do it this way. Okay, in that case, I'm going to go back to 4 and change this." And we were able to it was really kind of a cool process. Didn't you think, Mark? Like, this constant refining of what came before and sharpening it as we went. And, we joked earlier about how I need to know the end, and I did. I knew what each chapter was ultimately going to bring, but I never knew how Mark was going to get there.
Right.
And so then I would wake up to this chapter and think, wow, that was not what I expected. Okay, great. Well, now we're going to go forward this way. And then he would come back and tinker a little bit in mine, and then move forward on his next one. It was just a really dynamic process. I loved it. I've never co-authored before, but it was so fulfilling. It was so much fun to get that immediate feedback. You just never get that when you're writing.
Right.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, even, I talked to my partner about the projects I'm writing, but she's not in the manuscript. She's at the dinner table listening to me, again, misinterpret my own stuff.
Yes.
Whereas Julie's in the manuscript. Right. Every day we're back in. And when we turn the manuscript over to our editor by the end of the month, I think because we had done this staggered revising and tweaking and going back, and then we may change something in chapter 8 that we need to go back to chapter 3 and tweak again. Right. So we've already kind of cleaned it up a little bit. So hopefully that was a much less painful process for our editor to go through. Although she still found all kinds of great things that helped us make it better. But it was an exquisite experience. I've never had that kind of, and I've never felt so charged. Like I do. So when I'm in the middle of a process and I'm writing, I'm always so excited to get, I write in the mornings to get there, get my coffee on, get going. But with this, I had a partner in crime, and I was so excited to read what she had done. And sometimes I would read what she had done the night before, then sleep on it, and then write it. And sometimes I would read it in the morning, but it didn't matter how I did it. I was just so excited. And the other thing that, we never got to the block, because sometimes you get to the middle of the book and there's a block and you're like, oh, I know where I need to go, but I'm not sure how to get from here to here. Well, all I had to focus on was all I need to do is just what we outlined happens in this chapter. I can do that.
Right.
So we broke it down.
You had a schedule.
Well, it was Julie's schedule, but right. It was a great process because I don't know how to get from here to here, but the two of us are doing that. I only need to get to here. Oh, I could do that. That's easy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think you've maybe already answered this, but you have these two characters, but you're doing alternate chapters. So how did you decide on the POV for each chapter? Was it just, and was one of you more the male point of view and the female point of view? And I don't want to say who was which because I don't want to stereotype, but
what do you think?
You might have flipped that around just to make it a challenge each other. I don't know, but so because you do have the main character is he's the lead in the story, so I would assume he had the more numerous POV chapters, or how did that work for you?
It's equal. It was split down the middle. There's 20 chapters? I can't. 20 chapters plus a prologue and epilogue. I should know these things. But what happened was 20 chapters plus an epilogue and prologue. So there were 22 chapters and we each wrote 11. Now Julie wrote Gail's point of view and she wrote her chapters from Gail's point of view.
Okay.
I wrote Michael's chapters from Michael's point of view, and that was perfect because Michael's the supernatural being, so there's a lot more of the horror elements, and Julie's the romance writer, and from Gail's point of view, but also a hard-edged, tough woman, brilliantly portrayed, and I think that added a special character to it. We are doing an audio version read by the authors, available on loversmoon.ca, and we started serializing it. And what we're doing is I'm reading aloud Michael's chapters, and Julie is reading aloud Gail's chapters. But in dialogue, we're doing each other the voice of our own character in the other person's chapter. So I may say, and I walked up to the table and said, "Hey, Gail, how you doing?" And then when Gail replies, it's Julie's voice, not mine. So you actually hear Gail's voice, and and I don't know. I'm really enjoying the experience, and I think it adds an extra dimensionality to the uniqueness of each character's voice.
Cool. Is that the first time you've done audio, Julie?
Yes. Yeah, I have.
Find that?
Terrifying, like everything, but Mark's a very good cheerleader and has assured me that it's okay.
You have an amazing podcast. Over 100 episodes.
It's a different skill, though. I have tremendous respect for audio narration experts. Mark has background in theater and acting. I do not. And, it takes about 5 minutes of reading aloud to realize, oh, this is a different skill set.
Right.
Fortunately, I have 4 kids. I've read a lot of stories out loud, including doing voices. So I just said, pretend you're just reading to the kids, but actually a book that you would never read to children. So,
So is this your little sound stage booth here? Where you?
This is my little podcast booth. Yes.
Right. And what's the best book ever? I really want to read that.
It's Lover's Moon by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. The best book ever.
Nice.
This is the name of my podcast, The Best Book Ever.
Okay.
And this is actually a little present Mark gave me. It's actually a Christmas tree ornament, a little book that says Best Book Ever, but I keep it up here year round.
That's very cool. Okay, so we've got this book and it's available now or to be?
Yeah. It's in hardcover, paperback, audio, ebook. Now, the audiobook version is not available yet. Scott Overton, who does normally Michael's voice for my books, he's done his chapters, but the female narrator we've hired just got back from her honeymoon. She's not going to be able to get it done until later in the summer. So the actual official professional audiobook will not be out till the fall. However, there will be a much more cost-effective audiobook read by the authors. People have a choice. And at loversmoon.ca, which has the link to the books on all the platforms, that's where you can download. I think chapter 4 went live today. So every week a new episode comes out. A new chapter. So over the next, I guess, 18 weeks, I can't do math, 16 weeks, we'll get a chapter every week. So people can listen to it for free And then they will have an option to buy the audiobook if they want.
Right. And there's no issue between these two versions of the audio book?
No,
because you're self-publishing. Are you self-publishing this? Or
yeah,
are
so
you,
Stark
okay.
Publishing is my imprint, and I'm doing it under Stark, so I have not licensed the rights to any publisher.
Okay.
I'm purchasing the rights. We're purchasing the audio rights from the I signed a contract with Julie, so I'm the publisher. She's the co-author, and so we have the contract and the royalty splitting there. But even with the audiobook, it's we're paying for the rights up front, so we can do whatever we want with it. And there are different versions of audiobooks. There are dramatized versions, there's multicast versions, there's single narrator versions. It's kind of like large print, trade paperback, mass market, hardcover, all the different versions of print. There isn't an issue. You just need a unique ISBN for it. That's all.
Okay. So this is book 5. What's in store for the future for this series?
There's the money question.
I am hoping Julie will come along for the ride, because I'm not sure if I could ever write Gail again and do her the same justice Julie did. But Michael and Gail discover a new big nasty that comes to the city, and they need to kind of work together to figure this out. And they have fought alongside before several times, and it's called Hex and the City, because again, a play on words with a familiar title. And that's coming out in February. And of course, the master planner that I am, all I know is, yeah, something's going to happen. They're going to have to fight together. It's probably going to involve a hex of some sort.
I'm sure you've got your schedule all mapped out already, Julie.
Even if I don't co-author with him, I'm going to write him a schedule.
Very good. Okay, I think that's all I had about this particular series. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about it that hasn't come up yet, or?
No, those are great questions, Lou. I can't think of anything that I didn't want to talk about.
Super. Okay, Julie, how about you? What do you got what pokers do you have in the fire for yourself right now?
I am about to release a historical prequel to one of my contemporary novels that's going to come out probably in the fall. And then I am currently working on a historical novel that is just in the works. It's been in the works for many years. Okay.
And what's the title of the book that you have just?
The one that's coming out is called Where It Ends.
Okay.
And it's set in 1969 in Southern California. And it's just, like what I always normally do when I'm not with Mark. It's just sort of a tragical romance.
Okay, and it's available at all?
It's not available yet. Not yet. It's coming out, I think, September, I believe.
Okay, but it will be available in all the outlets?
It will be available in
Amazon,
all the outlets.
Kobo?
Yes, indie bookstores.
Indie bookstores. Okay,
yes.
Very good. And how about you, Mark? What do you got going besides this series?
I am working hard at, speaking of Julie and I, both were fans of the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And this year, it's the 35th anniversary of the book. And so I am releasing in the fall. I'm doing the research for The Canadian Mounted, which is the name of the book that Del Griffith is reading in the airport in New York, which was actually a real book, a real a novel published in the 80s that's since gone out of print. But this Canadian Mounted's version is a trivial guide to planes, trains, and automobiles, including the use of this book, a history of where this book came from, why it was in Deadpool 2, and a whole bunch of other trivial things, cut scenes from the movie. So much great research. I mean, I love John Hughes, John Candy. I love that movie, and so I'm just having so much fun nerding out on all the trivia for that. And that's up for pre-order. Most online bookstores coming up.
Okay, very cool.
Just in time for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Thanksgiving.
That's right. Okay, so Julie, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
You can find me everywhere as Julie Wrote a Book on Instagram, and my website is juliewroteabook.com, and I have a podcast called Best Book Ever on Instagram, Best Book Ever Podcast. Okay,
Mark?
You can find out everything you need to know about me and things you don't want to know about me over at markleslie.ca.
All right, very good. Well, I really enjoyed having you both on. It was very entertaining, and I wish you all the best with all your projects going forward.
Thank you, Lou.
All right.
Thanks,
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right. Take care, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. And scene.